You made it. It's Solid Soul here once again, and today's video we'll be discussing the best carry heroes to play in Year 7 Season 2. For Honor is a 4v4 based game, but sometimes it feels like a 1v7. This tier list will consist of heroes that get the most amount of value in your For Honor games to solo carry. But before we get started here, I really want to thank each and every BEA beautiful soul out there who showed up to the Twitch stream for the support, because I did manage to win 100k steal. Thank you guys for the support. I streamed for, I think, maybe 45 hours or something within a week. It was a hell of a time, but we had a lot of fun, and so glad you guys could hang out with me during that time. Back to the tier list. Ubisoft has done quite a few adjustments to the heroes in the roster, and it's time for a new tier list that helps determine the best carry heroes. Matchmaking lobbies can make you mauled for days, and I want to stress that this tier list is not for the top 1% of players who play scrims and can react to animations or parry flash consistently, because their games consist of coordinated plays that synergize with their teammates that they play with all the time. Many of us don't have that luxury, and this is a duels and dom tier list, so the duel tier list will be completely at the end. The first part is just going to be me talking about the ins and outs of each character for Dominion, and duels will have a short mentioning at the end where I place all the characters. Heroes right now are pretty powerful besides a few losers, but the gap is closing, and that's a good thing. One important thing I'd like to add is that the order of these heroes won't necessarily matter and will all be relatively the same power level. Here's the last tier list I did about 3 months ago, and you'll see that quite a few heroes will be changed and will shift due to the buffs, nerfs, and the overall game balance. First things first, before we dive on in, let's discuss some really important traits or quirks that heroes need to have in order to be viable in this meta. External unblockables, undodgeable pressure, wide hitboxes, easy gank setups, full blocks, hyper armor, dodge cancel recoveries, including Sifu and hidden stance, 400 MS, unreactable lights, dodge attacks, enhanced lights, roll catchers, clutch potential such as high damage punishes like Way of the Shark, wall splats, and ledges, and then of course feats. Remember, the more of these traits a hero has, the less you need to think critically with them, giving you an edge over a hero that doesn't have those quirks. Full blocks and dodge cancel recoveries are one of the most prominent traits to have and will most likely skyrocket the specific character up in the tier list. As for perks, the best perks to be running are as follows: Bastion, Bulk Up, Endurance, Headhunter, Last Stand, Vengeful Barrier, Rapid Refresh, Remedy, Rising Dawn, and Supersonic. You may wonder why I chose Supersonic, and well, that's because if you pop it, you can run away if you decide that you won't be able to stall long enough for your teammates to come help you. It's always better to keep that KD ratio positive and higher for your sanity, especially when playing with randoms. We all know that when you're in a bad mood, you start to shift blame onto others when you personally could be doing slightly better. And of course, it's not going to be your fault all the time, but sometimes it is what it is. You should aim to have at least 2 of these perks on your hero for an optimal setup. I'm not saying you necessarily need perks to do well, but they can and will help clutch out your games, especially the heavy perks. Let me know if you find any other combinations that are beneficial for you and have given you great success in this meta. Starting off with probably the best character in the game, especially when it comes to 4v4 strictly and team fights, and just a whole lot of, basically small brain, but getting a huge amount of value in the lobby. Now, Medjay has huge hitboxes with his hyper armor heavies and his light attacks. So the finisher light, that's even 500 MS, you can target swap that, and it will hit and chip a bunch of players around you. Mind that it might hit your teammates, but you control an entire team fight with your hyper armor that nobody really wants to try interrupting you, unless there is a character with a full block like Kyoshin, Warlord, or even Black Prior that can flip it or deal with it. That is something you have to be worried about, but overall, without those characters in the lobby, you can essentially just do whatever you want and keep attacking for days. The huge hitboxes on his dodge attack also will prove beneficial to you, because you can essentially target swap with that, making it near impossible to parry. Even though dodge attacks have become light parries, it hasn't really affected Medjay or people in 4v4 that much. The clear on this unit is ridiculous. You can clear it in 2 seconds and move on to help your teammates gank or go ahead and stall on a point. I cannot stress how important mid-clear is in this game. His forward grab on his staff arm is also one of the best gank tools in the game. You can essentially 100 to 0 quite a few characters, and a lot of players won't be full HP anyways, and you never really want to do that in the beginning. You want to lower him down slightly and then the grab gank will essentially finish people off. If you don't know how to do this, essentially if you can land the grab, which has pretty good tracking when it comes to someone who tries to dodge the wrong way, your teammate will go for a heavy and follow up with a light attack so that you get hit stun, and then the grab can be used once again, over and over again, making your opponent mauled for days. What's also helpful about this grab is that it has quite a few utilities. You can guard break someone, and if they're in revenge, you can wall splat them, and you are guaranteed to get the grab, wasting even more revenge. I do love the animation, but it holds a lot of value just for simply existing. His roll catchers is probably one of the best in the game. I mean, it's a really big axe or staff, and you're gonna have to be careful when you dodge roll away from his mix-ups. Now that's just his staff form. The axe form has 400 MS line attacks, a 500 MS bash. The unblockable heavy finishers are really weird looking. The animations are really tight, and they're basically berserkers, and it's hard to parry just with animations. I'd say overall he's a really easy character, probably the easiest character to use and get a ton of value. For the feats, just use all the defaults. The Moonlight Drain lowers defense and staff, and in the axe form it lowers the attack if you land the bash. Powerful in ganks, can basically just destroy somebody and obliterate their health points, and of course Astral Manifestation, which deals 70 damage as a projectile. The stalling for this character is pretty darn good when you're in his axe form. The anti-ganking is also pretty solid, I'm not gonna lie to you. A lot of people won't be able to react to the unblockables, so really powerful when you get the axe going on. And the ganking is top tier. Jiang Jun is up next on the chopping block, and this mad lad has stayed a pretty powerful character for the longest time. Huge hitboxes with his hyper armor heavies and his unblockable heavy that also has an amazing hitbox. Probably one of the best team fighters next to Medjay. And the follow-up light, even though it's 500 MS, it can be tricky to parry sometimes due to the animations. Once you delay it and mix people up, you can utilize it more efficiently. And of course, we can't forget about his Sifu stance. This regenerates stamina, really good iframes, and afterwards you can use it in a team fight to send out your unblockable heavy attack, which will deal damage to people who are hit stunned and who aren't paying attention, especially when you're externaling them. And after the unblockable zone attack, you can go into an unblockable finisher or a light attack, depending on the situation. The choke in the game is probably just one of the best tools or utility in the game. Not only does it drain stamina, but you can essentially use it to wall splat and get a clutch potential to land a side heavy, which deals a whopping 27 damage. Your zone becomes unblockable when you do get a parry as well, so he has a neat feature after that. Wish more heroes had that kind of quirk. The shin kick is also considered a pin, so you will take full damage, and it's a hit stun reset, and it's a really good ganking tool. So I'd say Jiang Jun is insane when it comes to team fights and 1v1s. He also has really high damage punishes that can land 2 heavies on any throw whatsoever. The roll catcher is also a significant part of his kit. Basically, it's probably one of the best roll catchers in the entire game. Mid clear is pretty solid. All you do is zone into light or unblockable heavy finisher and go into your Sifu and get all your stamina back. Pretty efficient if you ask me, and really solid when there's actually enemies in there. The dodge attack he has is an incredibly powerful mix-up. You can use a soft feint light attack or just heavy feint into a guard break. Tons of iframes, and I think a lot of 50-50 characters do hate Jiang Jun, especially in team fights where you can use that to reposition around the map. The heavy attack deals a shinto ton of damage, and you are essentially safe unless there's a character that's an undodgeable. Zhanhu is probably the biggest threat to Jiang Jun, but Jiang Jun has his own thing going on with the hyper armor, and I cannot stress how strong hyper armor is in team fights. With the unblockable heavies being soft feintable, I don't really think Jiang Jun has any weaknesses whatsoever. The feats you should be running are Deadly, Inspire, Soothing Mist, and really any of his tier 4s. His tier 3s, you can just run Second Wind as well, but you kind of want to be a team player for Soothing Mist, depending on how much team fights you are actually in. Phalanx or Fire Flask is probably what I should recommend, but it really depends on your playstyle. They all have value. The stalling capabilities are top tier. Anti-ganking, you can pretty much kill an entire team, and of course the ganking is insane, especially when you do light whiff into unblockable or confirm attacks with your kick mix-up. Afeera, one of the characters that, is fairly new and still incredibly powerful in pretty much any single situation whatsoever. With an unreactable feintable bash from neutral, it's slower but you can feint it and it's unreactable, so it's fantastic for starting offense or baiting people out. out. What's nice about the finisher is that you can choose between undodgeable and unblockable, and a left side heavy that can displace people. The follow-up attack can be target swap too, so be careful about that. Usually high level Afeera players tend to do that. Crushing counters on all of her lights, even her finisher ones, so be careful if you think she's done attacking with the light attacks, because she can crush and counter somebody accidentally or on purpose. Her backwards light mix-up is also very strong too. Overall, a really safe character. Good roll catcher, as you guys know. The forward heavy is pretty fast, 500 MS, and the bash itself, and they call this move the fleeting foot, will chase you after a really far distance. Pretty cool animation if I say so myself. What's really cool about our finisher heavies is that the right one is unblockable, really good hitboxes, the top one is undodgeable, and the left one is the displacement heavy, which does 16 damage in comparison to the 18 for the other two. She does have that chain kick, which guarantees another 18 damage heavy, and of course dodge cancel recoveries on pretty much every single move, and this dodge cancel recovery is basically like a Shinobi backflip of sorts. You can guard break it, but she does have tons of other mix-ups afterwards. When using it, you can do light attack, you can go into a kick, you can go into the feignable bash mix-up, which is probably more recommended, as you are guard break vulnerable after missing the kick, and in team fights this kick can land some nasty damage and set up some nasty ganks. I think the strongest part about this character is going to be her feats, tier 1 and tier 3. These are insane. Gravity's Pull is a 500 MS bash that deals 20 damage and easy to land for free heavies from your teammates. Speeding Comet is also the bash that has a full block property and chases. This lands 30 damage and a follow-up 18 damage heavy attack. Very powerful, and it's kind of hard to see because they are also 500 MS. The cooldown for this is 90 seconds. I think this is too low for what value it generates. The cooldown for the tier 1 also is only 60 seconds, and I think they need to increase this to at least 90, or just lower the damage by a lot. Fortune's Favor, you should probably be running that. It's not too crazy. I mean, it's a 20% defense buff. Pretty cool if you ask me. Orbiting Shield is an okay feat. I'd say it's good if you actually hit someone, but it seems like it hits your teammates a lot more often than you want it to. Now, the reason I rate Afeera so powerful is that she has so much clutch potential. With her bash getting a deflect, superior block deflect, you can use the displacement heavy that deals 16 damage, and if there's a wall splat, a wall nearby, you can get a top heavy for 27 damage. This is ridiculous. So if you parry a heavy attack, you are able to land the bash, get an 18 damage punish, or if there's a wall nearby, you can get the wall splat, dealing well over a heavy damage on a light parry. That's ridiculous for a character. Power creep is real, I'll tell you that much. This specifically swings fights tremendously into her favor. She already has a lot in her kit already, and with her having these displacement heavies and so much high damage punishes, makes her really hard to deal with, and you can't mess up on your reads. The tri-directional heavy attacks are incredibly powerful, lots of mix-ups, and you have to be paying attention when you're fighting this character. Always be sure to look at her feats and see if they're available, so you know when to kind of dodge them and expect the 500 MS bash. Overall, Afeera is great at stalling, probably one of the best. Anti-ganking is also not too shabby either, with great hitboxes or unblockable heavies, and the chain kick and undodgeable mix-ups. The ganking is also insane as well, because that bash is unreactable and it's going to deal a ton of damage. Tiandi is the next X tier, and with the true 50-50 bash mix-up, the undodgeable lights, the 400 MS chain light, the forward bash, with of course dodge cancel recoveries on every single attack, you have a monster on your hand. If you're not reacting or parrying those 400 MS chain lights, you're gonna suffer with his bash and his undodgeable lights, so keep an eye out for that. This can be utilized in all forms, in 1v1s or 4v4s, so you can't really negate his mix-ups, and with the forward dodge heavy being a hyper armor trading and going to his kick pin mix-up, you are in for a hell of a time. The pin is essentially strong in team fights, although they did nerf his damage values overall and across the board. Seems like it still holds plenty of value, and I think he's still going to remain a top tier character. It only does 20 damage for the follow-up heavy, but of course you can feign it or go into a soft feint undodgeable light attack to mix you up even more. Mid clear for this character is pretty insane. All you do is just zone, and it has a huge hitbox and will clear minions in a couple of seconds. Zone itself is already large, so if there are enemies nearby, you will smack quite a few minions already while initiating your offense. Not only do the screams hurt your ears, especially the female one, but his dragon dodges do have plenty of iframes for him to reposition around the map, ignore certain mix-ups in general, and essentially stall for days on point. When he's stalling on point, you need to try to kill him fast, otherwise you've essentially lost the game because you haven't gotten any points generated at all. All in all though, Tiandi is just a really strong character and has decent ganking and anti-ganking within his kit. He can stall for really long periods of time, and due to his feats such as Doom Banner, Vital Leech, and Indomitable, you can basically become one of the most annoying characters in the game. There's a reason why dodge cancel recoveries are so powerful, and Tiandi basically embodies it. Orochi is the next S tier, and this guy is also the embodiment of dodge cancel recoveries. I'd say he is even more annoying than Tiandi in my opinion, especially in teamfights and ganking. His forward kick is the 300 to 500 MS bash, which is solid but not the best. Confirms a light into an unblockable heavy finisher, which is okay, I'd say, for mix-ups, but I think the real powerful part about Orochi is his Storm Rush and of course his ganking utility. Storm Rush is a hit stun reset, and so essentially whatever attack you take afterwards is full damage. If he manages to land a kick, he can go into a dodge cancel recovery into another kick to confirm 2 heavies with your teammate. And of course this is only going to happen if you have a coordinated teammate. In most cases you won't, but if you're duo queuing, then you might have a better time in Dominion. And I don't even think I need to mention how powerful Storm Rush is. The undodgeable attack is a hit stun reset, a pin, which makes it so that you take full damage on every single attack, and you can utilize it for basically any single gank. His zone is great for externals and repositioning and stalling on point. Stalling is a very powerful factor when we're talking about Orochi. His stalling is good because he can just zone attack, target swap, and dodge to the side. Undodgeable dodge attack, which can also mess people up if they decide to parry, and if you don't have a full block character, you are screwed. So that's why they've been making full block characters so strong lately, so that characters like Jiang Jun or Tiandi and Orochi, those characters can't just do whatever the heck they want. So it seems like a full block character is mandatory against characters like Orochi. The mid clear for Orochi is pretty good too. All you do is just zone into another dodge attack and dodge cancel into another zone, etc, etc. And it's just rinse and repeat, and you can do that while fighting other players as well. Orochi does have a double light, and you can delay it, making it easier for your opponent to land their heavies much faster if they're a little bit slow. So this, I cannot stress, is quite powerful in the right hands and when used correctly. So delaying that is really good and kind of sends a pseudo mix-up because it kind of stresses or really pisses off and tilts people, because why not just use the normal speed of the attack? It's guaranteed anyways. But Orochi mains know how it works. You can BM or use it to gank more efficiently. The finisher heavy is also so much faster now, and I believe it's 700 MS, and it's crazy, amazing in team fights, and it has huge hitboxes. You cannot underestimate this at all. The forward light is a great roll catcher, and Storm Rush can be utilized in that regard as well. Most feats that Orochi run will be Ki, Bounty Hunter, and I cannot stress how powerful Ki is, especially in a 1v1 setting. It does feed a lot of revenge, but used in 1v1 settings and getting it back so quickly is detrimental to the opponent's stamina. Kunai is an incredibly fast cooldown and deals 15 damage. Slip through makes your dodge attacks much stronger and also makes your deflect do more damage. And for his tier 4s, you can basically run any of them, but most people run Nail Bomb and Fear itself. Now, while Orochi doesn't excel in 1v1s, his best play is going to be team fights, and that is where he will be one of the best team fighters in the game. Zhanhu is the next one in line. He's got quite a few things going for him. With dodge cancel recoveries, again, just being able to zoom around, rotate around characters, and avoid certain mix-ups, this character has a lot going for it. The undodgeable zone is great, like I said, against characters. I like to do their Tiandi dodges, the dragon dodges, and Jiang Jun. However, you should be careful in using this against characters like Orochi, because they can essentially just deflect into it on their dodge cancel recoveries, even accidentally. So that's something you gotta look out for. Otherwise, Zhanhu with the unblockable heavy finishes that are soft feintable are really good, and the animation, I feel like it's a little bit hard to tell because he seems to just stop midway through. The soft feintable unblockable heavies are going to be great for 1v1s and target swapping attacks because their hitboxes are ginormous. The deflects, superior deflects, also come in handy as well, especially in team fights, because you can essentially be safe and get guaranteed damage with your dodge attacks. And keep in mind the dodge attacks are 400 MS from both sides and can be used in a lot of tricky fashions. You can do a pseudo mix-up where you just empty dodge and guard break people, and they'll expect to go for a parry, and that can be pretty devastating to their HP because heavy attack goes into a zone for target swapping or just go into unblockable heavy attack. It's going to be really beneficial for you, especially for your teammates. Mid clear is pretty top tier. All you do is zone into a dodge light, into another zone, etc, etc. Rinse and repeat. Great for team fights in general and avoiding minion damage. The forward light is also enhanced, although it's not probably the best tool to be opening with because his palm strike is probably the better tool. You can initiate with that, and it does have dodge cancel recoveries as well, but it's not as good as Orochi's or Tiandi, so keep that in mind. Cool thing is that his forward heavy does a lot of damage and it's a great roll catcher, but if you manage to get a superior block deflect, you can make it an unblockable heavy attack and go for feint or let it fly. And a lot of people don't expect this. One, it's a little bit hard to perform, and it's you'd rather just go for the guarantee attack anyways. But you know, Zhanhu overall is a great team fighter. I don't think he's gotten any weaker or necessarily any stronger. He's just kind of remained a top tier character that a lot of people have trouble fighting against because he's unblockables and dodge cancel recoveries are really powerful. The unblockable lights are 600 MS, and I think I parry these like maybe 80 or 90% of the time. These are not really viable, especially when you're dueling somebody who has decent reactions and can look at the animations carefully, because it's really telling. So don't use that too much. Use it sort of in once you have them in a mind game, because the unblockable heavies itself already are your mix-ups. A lot of frame advantage with Zhanhu, so you gotta respect him. You have quite a few choices to use with Zhanhu. You can use Tireless, or you can use the Kunai, and then the Quinlan Rose deals a ton of fire damage, and it really synergizes well with your Kunai. Always want to go for Longbow because it finishes off enemies quickly, and then you can utilize your tier 4 tactical nuke, which does more damage if there are enemies closer to each other. So try to time them right, and I think the animation for it looks awesome. Kind of looks like a bomb just blasting. Zhanhu Oppenheimer, basically. So Zhanhu is a great staller. You can stall on point for a long time. Great at clearing minion lane. Anti-gank with this character is pretty good too, because the unblockable heavies will create a reaction from a lot of players, especially when you external it. And the ganks aren't too bad either, especially if you just go for indicator ganks. Light whiff into unblockable heavy finisher does a ton of damage. Winner's advantage is also a decent feat to be running with him, but like I said before, it depends on your playstyle. Kyoshin is the next X tier, and unfortunately, he does exist with the full block simulator. His mid clear is pretty solid. All you have to do is go into full block, zone, into heavy, rinse, and repeat. Now this character excels really well in lower matchmaking or just medium tier matchmaking, and once you get good with him, I think he can prove to be a real menace. So the full block simulator essentially can hit stun you for 3 attacks, and you will just be stuck there waiting for the enemy team to heavy you in the face. If you know his ganks, it's pretty powerful. What you do is you have the guard break for the Kyoshin. Kyoshin goes for his unblockable heavy, and you land a heavy, and you land another heavy attack, and the Kyoshin does a guard break confirm. Just simple things like that. If you know that gank, man, it's going to make your life so much easier. But Kyoshin has crushing counters on his attacks. He has full blocks. They can go into full block light attack, full block zone that does an AoE 360, which can hit multiple people, or you just go for your top heavy. His chain bash is also pretty good, but his forward bash is the 300 to 500 MS startup, so that bash is good for most of the player base and it will work. The forward heavy also has pretty good tracking, and you need to be careful because if you dodge this into a dodge attack, he can cancel all of his recoveries into his full block, so that makes him a little bit hard to hit in team fights and 1v1, so look out for that. If you don't have a character that utilizes unblockables from neutral or finishers, try not to let your heavies fly or light attacks hit him, and essentially guard break more often than not. But you also need to be careful with that because Kyoshin will just start hitting with lights or zone attacks. He does have undodgeable heavy finishers, and that can prove to be pretty devastating in team fights and 1v1s, especially if you make the wrong reads. So he's not a character you need to underestimate because you see him a lot because he's very easy to play and gets a ton of value in the games. Now when he's in his Kaze stance, the one on the right is going to be the 500 MS one, and the one on the left, which is his zone input, is going to be 600 MS. So if you have trouble parrying or blocking Kaze stance attacks, just try to keep your guard on the left hand side, and if you see any indicator whatsoever and it comes from the right side, then it'll probably be an easy parry if you're on new gen and PC. When you are ganked against this character in a 1v2 setting, you can probably just say goodbye to your health pool because there's not much you can really do in this situation, especially if two of those players know what the heck they are doing. A lot of the times, I try to guard break the Kyoshin, get in a light attack, into a dodge cancel recovery or whatever, or hyper armor trade and target swap to the other guy, but a lot of the times that kind of just gets me killed in the process. It lets me do a little bit of damage before I die, but overall you need to be very careful to not get into that situation in the first place, because if you're in that situation, you should most likely die about 90% of the time. Feats to be running should basically just be all of his default feats. And if you want to be pretty helpful in teamfights, you can use Arrow Strike for your tier 2. It does prove to be beneficial. I've seen a lot of Kyoshin use that as well to clear minion lane or just deal a lot of damage to the opponent in teamfights. The stalling capabilities are pretty solid for Kyoshin. Anti-ganking is not that great. It's not his greatest potential, but when it comes to ganking, that's where all of his potential lies. One of the best gankers and annoying characters to be up against in a 1v2. And now we have the last S tier character, Black Prior. This guy, he can essentially do it all. He is your solo carry if you want to get really good at the game. Crushing counters for defensive capabilities. He has a chain, 500 MS bash to get into a light and get into a frame advantage with his unblockable bulwark heavy, which is pretty darn good. Horizontal cleave and an undodgeable finisher heavy as well within that chain bash. Makes up a forward heavy that is an okay roll catcher. You kind of have to do it on a read or really early if someone dodge rolls. But what makes this character a strong pick in all situations whatsoever is that he has the 100 to 500 MS bash. That's the neutral one that I'm talking about. And a lot of players can't react to that consistently. And of course, after that light, you do get frame advantage using your unblockable heavy finisher to get that sweet 24 damage heavy. The next best thing about his kit is that his bulwark can flip everything. So with the amount of bashes and dodge cancel recovery characters with huge amount of hitboxes that we're getting, Black Prior is just the answer to the cancer. You can flip everything with all your dodge cancel recoveries. This is your best tool in Dominion. You can stall for days, your anti-ganking is top tier, and your ganking is not too shabby either, especially with the indicator gank. There's not much you can do to Black Prior, especially if you know he's a good player. However, I think a lot of Black Priors fall from the mistake of trying to bulwark everything from neutral. Bulwarking everything from neutral is a big read, and it's high risk, high reward, but getting guard broken from that is going to be detrimental to yourself and your HP pool. You need to learn how to bulwark, bait, and all those good stuff. You'll see here in the clip that I'll be doing bashes into nothing from neutral, and then using my bulwark counter right after that to bait out the lights, heavies, bashes, etc, etc. I think it's cool to try to bait out those bashes from neutral, but it's a little bit tricky and you have to be really focused. All in all, Black Prior has it all going on, and if you really want to carry your games, this is the character. The mid clear is pretty unsatisfactory. It's okay. It's nothing fancy. It does have the infinite chain, but it does cost a lot of stamina to use. The zone attack is not too shabby either. It does have pretty decent hitboxes. Feats to be running should be your Sinister Shield, and of course holding full block and gaining HP back. I'd say that's a pretty good feat. Some people have been running Doom banner, and that's not too shabby either for team fights. And of course you need Oathbreaker. Oathbreaker is just game changing for a tier 3. I think it's one of the best feats in the entire game. For a tier 3 that is. And it just removes all your shields for the person who's getting ganked and who has revenge. So it makes revenge useless. And then of course we have Armbrust Shelter, which keeps you alive for about 11 seconds of shield. So really powerful stuff, and this character, you just cannot go wrong. I've debated on putting him around A+ tier, but I think since I'm pretty good with BP or BIP, I'm gonna put him in S tier because he is the character that I find most enjoyable when there's so many bashes and unblockables in the game right now. Moseying on over to the A+ tier characters. Now these characters, they're really strong, and I think they have a lot of value. So Shaolin has enhanced lights on his top light. He has the 300 to 500 MS startup bash, which is not too shabby, but the great thing about Shaolin's kick itself from neutral is that instead of doing just a normal light, if you do whiff, so if you do a light attack or a heavy attack if you whiff. But Shaolin, he can do a zone afterwards. So if someone parries you and they think it's a light attack, which is 500 MS, the zone will essentially just count as a heavy parry. So they will only get a light attack, which is crazy. And I don't think any other character really has this mix-up, which is pretty nice if you do fail on doing a whiffed kick. So with the whiff kick or just a kick and drone, you get your chain bash. With the cheese stance kick or cheese stance lights, these have crushing counter properties, insane for team fights, I kid you not. And guess what? He also has undodgeable heavies that are really good, especially since the guard changes. And once he is in cheese stance, there are a plethora of things you can do in the situation. The dodge attack is amazing. The hitboxes are ginormous. I think it might be one of the best dodge attacks in the entire game because the hitboxes are so ginormous. So he can dodge, cancel out of his cheese stance into another dodge attack, into a kick, into a forward heavy, which is an amazing roll catcher. I think Shaolin has one of the highest skill curves in the entire game. And what's more is that he has a pin which sweeps people and guarantees a ton of damage, feightable to guard break or to more mix-ups. And there's just so much things that Shaolin can do that it can feel a little bit oppressive. And in team fights, he has the edge because his hitboxes are huge and you can essentially be untouchable from time to time. Try not to attack the Shaolin too much, especially in team fights when he's in cheese stance, because those crushing counters can be devastating to your teammates. His mid clear is also pretty fantastic. You can just zone for days, or you can essentially face the enemies and just do dodge attacks and cancel into cheese stance to another dodge attack because, like I said, hitboxes are huge. After all that, he does have 400 MS chain lights after utilizing a heavy. He does have a infinite combo of sorts, but this is not really your best offense. It could be useful from time to time to mix people up, but you definitely want to utilize that cheese stance as much as possible. The cheese stance synergizes really well with his feats in general. You can run stealth or key trap. Key trap is good, but I think it can be a little bit tedious on certain maps. It is pretty powerful for tier 1, but stealth it might be the way to go in a lot of situations. Cheese stance will synergize really well with blink because you can use it within that, and you can use it to knock people off ledges, which is pretty darn crazy. Invigorate also heals so much HP from your teammates, whether it's blocked or hit. We have Blessed Projection, which basically teleports you to your teammate. Amazing. Shaolin's stalling capabilities are pretty nasty, I'm not gonna lie to you, with huge hitboxes, good light attacks, and the cheese stance where you can target swap. Use the kick on the first enemy and the target swap to the other enemy with the follow light attack makes you pretty hard to touch, I'm not gonna lie to you. I certainly feel that Shaolin is a character that can do pretty much everything. Teamfight, stalling, anti-ganking, and 1v1s incredibly well. Warmonger is the next character I want to talk about. Now, we all know her. She is one of the best knights in the entire game. We love her. Fashion is top tier. And enhanced lights, baby. Enhanced lights. If you don't parry, she gets to her mix-up. She does have the chargeable 50-50 bash. And it does have hyper armor to trade with you, so those pesky interrupters, they're gonna take a huge amount of damage. But the great thing about her in general is that she has huge hitboxes. Her heavies, her finisher heavies, and the forward undodgeable heavy is probably the best tool that she has. It'll catch those pesky people who do dodge cancels 24/7, the Tiandis, the Jiang Juns, the Orochis, all of them. It's fast and it hits really darn hard. The improvement to her dodge attack, the unblockable where she says die all the time, it can be spammable and you can use it for ganking and indicator spam. It has surprisingly good hitboxes. Like what you want to do essentially in team fights is position yourself ever so slightly so that the unblockable heavy that you're targeting to hits or clips the enemy on the side, because surprisingly you'll be like, oh wow, I did not know that would hit him, but the hitboxes are pretty good. The only thing you need to be careful about is that you are guard breakable during the beginning of that, but afterwards you have amazing iframes. Pretty huge change for Warmonger if I do say so myself, and of course it's feightable. So I'd say the only weakness about this specific character is that you don't have an infinite like Wardens, but I think you have enough tools, and actually more tools, to deal damage in team fights and be more useful as a character. The zone has amazing hitboxes, good for mid clear, but essentially you just kind of want to throw raw heavies in mid clear because her hitboxes are huge, clears minions within a couple of seconds, and you can go help your teammate afterwards. You have a really good running attack, so if you manage to catch someone that's not paying attention, you can hit them really far away with the running attack. It's actually crazy, and of course it's a chain starter. And the third best thing about her, of course, is going to be her impale. This does 30 whopping damage, so if there's a wall nearby and you manage to get a wall splat, you will get 30 damage off of a heavy parry, which is insane. It's probably going to be nerfed in the near future. And I also want to let you guys know that this is also the max punish for a light parry. Light parry, normally you'd go for 27 damage raw, and that's just the top heavy, but if you have enough time, you think you have enough time to spare, and they don't have like a healing feat of any sorts, you want to go for the impale if there's a wall nearby, because that's 3 more damage, and 3 more damage is a lot. Tier 1 corruption is a team winning fight, and it's one of the best feats. Actually, it's the best tier 1 in the entire game, maybe next to Ocelotl's, but we'll talk about his later. The stalling capabilities of Warmonger is pretty good. The anti-ganking is, it's kind of meh, you know, the 50-50s is good, but it's a little bit too slow. It doesn't deal as much damage as you want it to, since she doesn't have a finisher on blockable heavy. And the ganking is okay with Warmonger. I'd say she can deal some bleed damage if you have a Shaman or Nobushi that can enhance the potential of dealing as much damage as possible. So she has some synergy with those specific characters, and I think that's really fun. But anyways, the feats you want to be running are all the default ones. You can run Aerostorm if you want to. I think it can be helpful from time to time, but like I said, it's all going to be up to your playstyle, because Corruption Blast is most likely going to be your best tier 4. Warlord is a monster. I cannot stress to you how important it is to just have hyper armor. This is the clutch potential. Any character that has had hyper armor is going to be amazing in team fights. That's just a fact, alright? Since Warlord has instant startup hyper armor, like most characters in the game, you can essentially get some nasty trades. He has a undodgeable zone attack, which is really good in team fights, and catching people who dodge roll away from you. Just be careful not to spam it, because you will get deflected or parried since it's only 600 MS. However, one of his best traits, actually it is his best trait, is his 100 to 500 MS startup bash, and this headbutt goes hard. It's one of the best tools to open people up, and if you can't react to that consistently, well, you're basically screwed. He has frame advantage on pretty much everything, since after that headbutt, he can use a light attack, which is an enhanced light, and go into a finisher heavy attack, or go into more headbutts in general. But more importantly, Warlord has Crashing Charge, which is pretty decent for ganking and ledging, and of course, his guard break throws are gargantuan. Not only do they take about half your stamina, which is crazy, but essentially you can get ledged with this character a lot if you're not paying attention. You can only position yourself so well. The full block has tons of uses. It's not as great as other full block characters like Black Power Kyoshin, but it has tons of uses still. You can light attack out of it to get crushing counters with his light attacks, and of course neutrals, he does have crushing counters as well, so it's pretty fantastic for defensive capabilities. You can also use a zone or an undodgeable heavy attack. These are 2 different moves. There's a lot of utility you can perform with the full block itself. You can either dodge into it for a headbutt, or just empty, guard break, dodge out of certain attacks to bait people and go for a guard break, things like that. A lot of fun things you can do with Warlord. He's a simple character, but what he does effectively. The feats to be running should essentially just be the sprint or deadly, depends on what you really want. Sprint is probably the best one. You want to get to the points as fast as possible since you are pretty slow. Juggernaut, of course, Fury, and Fire Flash. Those are the best feats to be running for Warlord. He's great for stalling. He's not too bad at anti-gank, if I do say so myself. However, he doesn't really have a good roll catcher. The forward top heavy has hyper armor, and it can be good for an option select from time to time, but you know, it's not the best bet for a roll catcher. The ganking is also, you know, probably one of his best bets. He can just double headbutt for free 2 heavies. A lot of things going on for this guy, so his mid clear is okay. It's nothing special. That's not really where you want to be fighting. You just kind of want to anchor on a point and have it so that the enemy team can't get any points at all, because he's really hard to kill with his perks. In all honesty, when you're playing Warlord and the enemy team doesn't have good gank characters or have that much synergy in general, you can just anchor a point for a very long time and just stall for days. In the clips that I'm showing you right now, because they weren't able to get or defeat me in a very short period of time, they gathered no points at all, and I think that's the strongest part about this character. So if you're seeing a Warlord on point, if you don't have a good teammate or you don't think you can handle them in a duel setting, let your teammates take them so that they can finish them off so you can't get revenge, because the heavy perks on this character are incredibly strong. Now we come to the new hero Ocelotl. Now Ubisoft did nerf him recently. Now it seems that his neutral bash is no longer just going to deal damage, and I think this was a mistake change. I don't understand why they did that. One, it just makes his bash worse in general because he does have the 300 to 500 MS bash, and then he only gets 9 damage. It just kind of ruins the point of the character. All they had to do was remove the pin aspect of it, and then he would have been, you know, a decent character without the annoyance. However, with all of that aside, I'm pretty sure he's going to get changed in the future still. Overall, I believe he's still a strong character, really easy to use. I cannot stress how strong 4MS chain lights are. Most people can't even react to this. I can't even react to it consistently. If I see the red indicator, I'm going to go for a parry. I'm going to do my best so that he can't get into his chain mix-up. I'll eat that heavy if I have to, but I'll make sure that he tries not to throw it that much. Now, you can just basically unga bunga on this character. He's basically a little... He's like Medjay's little brother, essentially, and you need to be careful because if you aren't paying attention, you're going to get steamrolled by this character. So with the chain bash being feightable as an 800 MS bash, you are going to have to make a read on that. It's unreactable, and if you do get hit by that, you have to watch out for the finisher bash or get hit by a heavy attack or get guard broken or get hit by a 400 MS chain light. So there's a lot of options within his chain pressure. His chain pressure is solid. It's good. It's not bad at all as a duelist. Very solid, and as a 4v4, really good for pins and setting up ganks. I think he has powerful tools to make him a strong character, and he's really easy to use in my honest opinion. Those 4MS lights will take you very far. The forward light is also, I think it's pretty hard to react to in my opinion. The animation, he makes it seem that his attacks are not telegraphed. So he's got that going for him. His dodge attacks are also really fast. He's got chain hyper armor with his zone attack and neutral zone that can be feinted, which also has hyper armor. So good for trading. Ocelotl's hitboxes on his chain heavies, his chain zones, and his unblockable finishers have a tremendous range. It seems like he kind of pushes forward just like Pirate's chain heavy attack. It's really cool, and you gotta be careful about that because when you target swap, the hitboxes are ginormous. One very strong aspect about his kit is that he does have that Hunter stance. Now, the Hunter stance gives you iframes when you initially use it. However, I will say it is a fairly, I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't have as much utility as Sifu stance, as hidden stance, and any full block in general. So you basically just use it essentially just for ganking and setting up pins. And I'm not gonna lie, this momentum that you get with the heavy attack is insane. A lot of distance covered, and it's really useful. Although it is slower, you can set up some nasty ganks with it. Mid clear is pretty solid. You can just clear everything with heavies and chain zones, repeat, and rinse. Feats to be running, it really depends on how you want to play the character. Now, the tier 1, I believe, it is overpowered, and I think it is incredibly annoying and unhealthy for the game. It makes it so that your rotations are basically screwed. And not only that, I cannot stress to you how powerful it is to have, you know what, maybe a 30 HP Ocelotl back onto your home point, fighting you while you're low HP, and of course his teammate already came in there to stall for days. You're gonna get no points, and you're gonna have to keep fighting. When there's more than 2 or 1 Ocelotl, it'll feel a little bit unbalanced and not that fun. You can also catch people off guard when they are not paying attention, and it's pretty funny. The tier 1 is crazy. I think it can be balanced, but it just needs a few adjustments. Maybe a cooldown of sorts, or moving into a tier 2 or 3 or 4, and there's a lot of discussions about that. But you know, for his tier 2s, his tier 3s, his tier 4, basically just keep them at default or use second win. 4 is tier 3. The tier 2 you can kind of flip between Bear Trap or Vengeful Mark, which, you know, marks the person and lowers their defense by 15% for 20 seconds, and this is a pretty good feat, but it's just weird that you're getting rewarded for dying. It doesn't really make sense in a fighting game, especially a competitive game. Huntsman Spirits or Tireless. Some people run Tireless instead of Huntsman Spirit because they want full HP and they don't like the gimmick of Huntsman Spirit, which makes a lot of sense. You could go for the Quetzalcoatl, I cannot pronounce this, Quetzalcoatl Blessing, which killing an opponent grants you 25% damage boost and 25% speed buff for 20 seconds. Not too shabby if I say so myself, but personally I would run second win, as if you do run the tier 1 with the Huntsman Spirit, you can essentially get back to battle really quick. This is a game changer for fighting in the mid levels of For Honor. Having one person there on the enemy point or even your home point right away within 10 seconds is so powerful. And of course, you should always be running Trapper's Reach. You can do some funny stuff with this. You can ledge people. It does a lot of damage, tons of bleed damage, and it gives you a free heavy. It's basically a game-winning fight for 1v1s. Stalling capabilities are pretty solid, I'd say. A lot of hyper armor. The anti-ganking is not too shabby either, since his pin attack is pretty strong and he can feign his chain bashes. Fast forward him as light attacks. If you're not paying attention and focusing on blocking those, ganking is where he will excel because those pins are really fast and deal quite a bit of damage. Nobushi is the next A+ tier character. Amazing mid-clear, great for team fights in general, with huge amounts of peel. And if you guys don't know what peel means, it essentially means helping your teammate when they're in trouble with great range. She can land bleed attacks with her Cobra Strike, which has amazing iframes now. Amazing iframes. And what do you know it, she can dodge cancel out of that to make her fairly safe when it comes to avoiding mix-ups and repositioning in fights. I think one of the most important things is that her bleed barely feeds any revenge, and it probably will get nerfed, but what you can do is just spam your Cobra Strike on a person who has revenge, and when they exit out of it, when they leave revenge, they will have all that bleed stacked up. Now, Nobushi, she is not a duelist, she is more of a team fighter, and with the huge hitbox that she has within her zone attack, that goes into her chain kick, which can wall splat, which is pretty cool. However, the kick is only 566 ms, so it is a bit slower than a normal 500 ms bash, but you can delay it to a huge degree. You can also delay her heavy attacks, which can be undodgeable finishers. This makes up the kick into light, or the undodgeable will prove very beneficial for people who aren't paying attention. So if you're not focusing on the kick, you will get devastated by her because her bleed, which is way the shark, her clutch potential, will deal way more damage if you are bleeding. So you need to be careful with her. You can't underestimate her no matter what. Personally, when I am bleeding, I tend to play very defensively and walk backwards because Nobushi has no real neutral pressure, so I don't get taken out with that 35 damage heavy. The only bad thing about her kick specifically is that if you do dodge it, you can guard break her, or you can wait for her to do a light attack, which is an easy parry because it's very telegraphed, and the heavy attack follow-up, you can basically just guard break her out of that. So the kick is bad, but has a lot of clutch potential for wall splats and damage. Her Sidewinder isn't that useful for normal dodge attacking because it loses iframes much quicker than her Cobra Strike. However, you can use this to set up a external attack in case they want to parry it and they think you're starting off with a dodge attack of that sort. It can be very hard to tell if you're externaling that. It has really good hitboxes if someone is right next to you, so utilize that for a chain starter or go into your zone. It's all up to you. It depends on what the enemy you think is going to do. So good reads and good reactions. I don't find that this move is useless. I just think that it's used for a different tool, and you shouldn't have that much option selects when it comes to using your dodge attack 24/7, because you already have one good dodge attack, it's your Corpus Strike. You don't need another one with Sidewinder. The Sidewinder already has its own tool and its own utility. The bleed sometimes just stacks up when you're not paying attention. Good feats to be running. You can run Smoke Bomb, however, I think Aerostorm has proven to be a better feat in general. You can clear mid with it, you can deal damage, and I think it has more utility than Smoke Bomb these days. Running Longbow is going to be your best friend, and then using the Fire Trap. As for the stalling capabilities, I'd say it's pretty decent. However, there's zero anti-ganking whatsoever. The ganking is okay. She does have a few ganks, but hopefully you'll have someone to set you up with a more promising damage. If you're with a Shaman or a Warmonger, then things are looking up, but if it's anyone else, especially in solo queue, you're gonna have a rough time. Raider is a really good character to start picking up if you're new at the game. You can just keep throwing heavies, since the chain heavies have hyper armor, and take trades, or you can go to a soft feightable Storming Tap, which is unreactable to most people who aren't paying attention. The mid clear is fantastic, and the 3-chain lights are pretty helpful too for people who don't really expect it. I use it quite a bit, and a lot of players don't even try parrying it or will take a heavy if I decide to switch it up. So it's very risky trying to parry a Raider because he also has soft feint heavies with a chain enhance zone, which is a satisfying move, does a lot of damage, has pretty good hitboxes. However, it is very slow, but it's soft feintable. The neutral zone is a really good team fighting move has a huge hitbox, and does a ton of cleave damage. But what gives Raider's clutch potential is going to be his Stampede charge. Whether you get a guard break, you can go ahead and try to ledge someone, you can get a pin on them and have your teammates land some nasty heavies, or you can just go around the map and run around and try to Stampede charge people. His mid clear is one of the best. You can just heavy or just do triple lights and will take a ton of minions with you. Feats to be running or essentially just the same thing as always: Fury, Fire Flask, and all of that good stuff. You just can't go wrong with it. It's a team winning fight. At the end of the day, Raider is a pretty simple character. You can kind of mash buttons and get a lot of results. You have hyper armor, so you're good in team fights, and you can rotate really well because he has the largest, one of the biggest actually, I think it might be the largest dodges when it comes to externals, and you can reposition perfectly and favorable when you use your neutral zone to get some damage in. Next we have is Shinobi. Now Shinobi has a lot in his kit, a lot. Now his mid clear, all you have to do is essentially just zone attack, and you can clear the minions in maybe 2 or 3 zones, so it's not too shabby. But what he excels in is ganking and stalling. So his kick acts as a pin, and it's going to keep the person just flying about with no guard whatsoever for a very long time. Compared to like a Warlord, they go back to neutral pretty quickly, whereas Shinobi, he's able to keep them in this animation for a while, and this allows him to set up some nasty ganks with other players, if they're paying attention, that is. If you do land the unblockable heavy finisher or the undodgeable heavy finisher Sickle Rain, you can keep them stunned for maybe 2-3 seconds, just like Kaze Stance, and hit them with the triple lights, and that will land a lot of damage. Now, if you have a good teammate, you can essentially use the somersault kick gank. So if you manage to land a kick into the guaranteed light and go into your somersault, you can do the backwards flip, but instead of guaranteeing that heavy attack, your teammate's gonna do the heavy for you, and you're gonna roll back and roll forward again to do the kick to guarantee those 2 sweet heavies. Not too shabby of a gank, if I do say so myself. These are just very simple things. There's more complicated ones that you can probably learn somewhere else on the internet.com, but we're gonna have a good time with Shinobi because he just exemplifies the ability to gank really well. I think a lot of people find him annoying for this specific reason. He's very elusive with the double dodge mechanic of his dashes. You can rotate across the map really well and reposition. It's hard to catch him if you don't have an undodgeable. His light and zone attacks have really good range, but what sets him apart from a lot of these characters is that he has iframes on his backflips. His backflips are a great tool to cancel his recoveries. Have a lot of iframes, but you are vulnerable to guard breaks. However, it is a bit risky guard breaking him in team fights, so try not to do that because you can eat some major damage. There seems to be a consensus that Shinobi is not that great anymore because of his sickle rain feeds a little bit too much revenge, but that doesn't really matter in matchmaking too much because one, those 3 extra attacks should deal more revenge because you're stuck there. The person is stuck there and they're going to take full damage. It makes sense that those would feed more revenge. The more you hold on to a person, the more revenge they should get. So that part about his kit is perfectly balanced in my opinion. The deflects are also really powerful because they are the best deflects. You can essentially just teleport behind them and go into your 50-50 mix up with the kick or an undodgeable heavy attack. Shinobi also has a really quick parry follow-up, and you can use your kick afterwards or go into undodgeable heavy attack. Really cool mix-up, and I think more characters should have this type of mix-up. For his feats, I would recommend you to either use stealth and don't be a tool and use Ki, because I think Ki is going to get eventually destroyed in the future, hopefully, because that move is very overpowered. But a lot of people who do run Ki, you gain a huge amount of edge against the players that you're fighting against. So if you want to win games really badly but also have like small PP energy, go ahead and use that. You should slip through because your dodge attacks and your dodge bashes, which are great for option selecting because it has pretty good hitboxes. You can catch people even though they've dodged. It's kind of crazy, and you can use 2 double dodges to essentially option select certain characters that have undodgeable mix-ups, so that's also a really good thing he's got going for him. Shooting stars, which is another overpowered feat that does up to 80 damage if you're in their mix-up and they go for a guard break. So really powerful for a tier 2 because it does 20 damage normally. So if you get hit by all of them, it's 80 damage total. It's pretty disgusting. If you haven't seen my video of things that shouldn't be in For Honor, you can go and check it because Shinobi can do that, and I've gotten it pretty consistently, especially 40 damage or 60 damage shurikens. The 81 is a little bit more rare, but you can do it. As for the tier 4, you should probably be running Nail Bomb or Nikikubi, depends on your playstyle. Stalling for Shinobi is pretty good, anti-ganking not so much. It's kind of lackluster, and the ganking itself is going to be one of the top tiers in my opinion. And so we are finished with the A+ tiers, moseying on over to the A tiers. Now the A tiers are still powerful characters, it's just that they can't do everything at once compared to the other characters. They kind of have a certain role within the game, whether you're a team fighter, a ganker, or a staller. Centurion is next up on the chopping block, and I think he can be one of the best characters in the game, but you have to be playing perfectly and it has to be in the right hands, with the Roman punch being a chain bash, and you can charge it with hyper armor. The only bad thing about it currently, and I'm sure it'll get fixed eventually, just not really soon because the devs have stated that they are trying to work on it, but there's a lot of multi-layer issues. But you can double dodge his charged punch, and that is what makes him a little bit weaker. However, his heavy parry punishes are one of the best in the games. If you didn't know, after heavy parry, you can do the knee follow-up, and you can also land a confirmed punch. Add to the fact that if you have Haymaker equipped, which most players will, that will add up to 22 damage for heavy parry. That's essentially a heavy attack. It's crazy damage, very, very crazy. And Centurion, if you can get parries, and you have pretty good reactions and amazing reads, you will excel in him. You can probably win the games for most of your teammates if you're playing with a friend. You can gank and essentially take bases really quickly. Other than that, he does have 3 chain lights, and you can use them from time to time. It will surprise people, but his variable timed heavies are his greatest strengths. These heavies will be your bread and butter and will force your opponents to play somewhat defensively if they can't consistently parry these heavy attacks, because most players can't. Even the best players can't parry them consistently. They'll have to make good reads on it and be focused. In matchmaking, these things will land, especially if you delay them. The delayability window of these heavies are incredibly satisfying to pull up. I kid you not, this is one of the main reasons to play him. And I think couple that in with his light attacks that will surprise you, his charged bash, and his forward kick, which is fairly slow. The animation is pretty telling. However, the 300 to 500 MS startup, most players who are drunk and playing high and not really paying attention, just listening to music or watching a show on their other monitor or just on the TV next door or something like that, they're not going to be too focused, and Centurion will reign supreme in that area and get into his mix-up. So he does OOS pressure. His wall splat punishes are insane too. You can go for the charged punch that does the maximum amount of damage, or just go into your knee follow-up into the unblockable heavy attack. His dodge attack has also made him really helpful in team fights and just surviving and trying to options like certain mix-ups. The zone buff that he got recently, where you can use your zone a little bit more frequently, does help him in team fights. You can just cleave through and do a little bit of chip damage here and there. Obviously, be careful with revenge feeding because that does add attack, and the hitboxes aren't too shabby. Mainly used for clearing the minion lane, which is not too shabby. You can use like maybe 3 or 4 of them and then you can clear it. Another bread and butter of this character that makes him a top tier pick is his wall splat damage. Combine that with the Haymaker, you can punch people 2 times and throw for a wall splat, deal even more damage, and then go for your fully charged punch. There is an endless supply of tricks and tips for Centurion, but you know, this guy, there's an endless supply of tricks and tips with Centurion that make you a really hard character to beat. Centurion is one of those characters that you kind of have to respect no matter what, because he can clutch out a fight within seconds. With the wall splat, with the heavy parry, with the light parry, boom shakalaka. You're screwed if you don't parry those heavies because you take a ton of chip damage, and of course you get punched to death. And of course, don't be afraid to use that target swap bash, which can come in handy from time to time. For the feats to run, I think the most important thing is Haymaker and Bounty Hunter while using Pugyo, as Pugyo is really quick and lands you a lot of damage. Pretty much a tier 3 winning fight or a duel. Phalanx is probably your best friend, but you can go with Stalwart Banner depending on your playstyle. Now Centurion, he does not excel in anti-ganking. He is pretty meh, because once you get the punch off or fully charged punch or a throw, you can't really do much besides go for the Eagle's talent, and that's kind of a death sentence. It's wasting your revenge, so you're best off just using a normal heavy attack. and you're kind of stuck with that sort of mix-up. Once people roll away from you, you can't do much. The forward heavy has hyper armor, but the tracking is, you kind of have to use it on a read. It's a good move to use to try to maybe just go for a flashy play or get into the team fight really quickly, but you know, it doesn't really do much, although you can go into your chain bash mix-up, but it's fairly telegraphed and you don't want to be using it all the time. Ganking is where this character excels the most, and once you learn some ganks with this character where you charge your punch, it's basically game over. You can't get guard broken anyone on the level 1 punch, which makes it pretty darn powerful. So it seems that a lot of people are just taking the punches these days. Add that with Haymaker, you do a lot of damage. There's a lot of Centurions that don't know how to play him correctly in Dominion, and they kind of get bodied, but I think once you understand how to play him correctly and with your team and ganking situations, you can kind of carry your team. Valkyrie is a hero that has gotten some major nerfs the last couple of patches ago. So Valkyrie has that really fast 400ms bash, but of course it takes a bit of startup, and you can guard break her during her heavy attacks if she decides to go into her full block or goes for a forward dodge of any sort. So that can be a good mix-up or deterrent for the character. However, they remove the ability to do a follow-up light if she whiffs her bash. Now that weakens her severely when it comes to offense or chain offense in general. And you know how they like about chain offense. Ubisoft loves adding chain offense. So it's a little bit weird that they remove that aspect. Even keeping the 500ms light follow-up would have been at least helpful for her, but right now, as it seems, a lot of people don't play this character anymore because of that specific nerf. She's not really a pub stomper like she used to be. I think she's still really powerful. I think players who are playing the character who are still high rep and really enjoy the character for what she is right now, she is strong. She can pub stomp, and she has great utility with her sweep being 500ms and sweeping people down on the floor to land free heavies. That pin is spectacular. You can also confirm that once you learn the ganks, so it's very strong. The forward light is enhanced, and so is the dodge attack. But I think the bread and butter is definitely going to be your bash. This thing is scary when used correctly. You can't hit her. The best thing you can do is try to guard break her, but then she'll start using lights, and her zone has a pretty big hitbox for the mid lane and in team fights too. It used to be 500, but the 600 MS is not too shabby. It was pretty broken when it was 500 MS, but still a solid team fighting starter. Pretty good for peeling, but just be careful not to hit your teammates too much. Her heavies have amazing hitboxes. You will catch people for days when they empty dodge, and you can't underestimate this move because I've been dodging externally before and I've gotten hit by it. It's pretty disgusting. She still has that spectacular deflect where you can go into a guard break if you choose to ledge people or get another pin wall splat, things like that. Or you can go for your pin bleed attack, which has an amazing animation. What's underrated about her lights is that her finisher light can wall splat you, so if you try to prediction dodge the 500ms pin, you will get hit by that attack, and it can wall splat. It used to do stun, which I do miss, and the displacement takes you pretty far. It feels like a Jormungandr displacement. Used to be running, you should probably use Juggernaut, Bloodlust if you really want to be aggressive. You can't go wrong with Deadly or Bounty Hunter, and then of course Fire Flask. Javelin, of course. I'd say her stalling capabilities are pretty darn good. She has pretty good dodge attacks, and her zone is impeccable. The anti-ganking, I would say it's okay. You can deal a lot of damage at a time, but be careful on using your pin because you will be stuck due to the long animation recovery. But overall, I'd say she has a decent stalling and anti-ganking possibility. However, I think her ganking is probably one of the best, and her team fighting in general, because this character with the pin, which can be confirmed, is going to be devastating to the character's HP. So if you learn how to gank with this character, you will absolutely stomp lobbies. And even without playing with a teammate, I think she does fairly well. I've had really good games with this character, even though I don't want to play her that regularly. Now Berserker, our favorite character that has no fashion whatsoever. I'm just kidding, Berserker has some decent fashion, but let's go ahead and start. Berserker is a character that has slowly crept up into the higher ranks. He used to be okay, but now I think he's one of the best team fighters out there, and when it comes to team fighting, he can just weave through battle with his dodge cancel recoveries. Like I said, the dodge cancel recoveries make and break a character. Before, he didn't really have this, so he had to rely on good reads and repositioning well without dodge canceling, but after every single attack with this recent buff, you can essentially just be safe in a lot of fights against characters that don't have full blocks or good chasers with the undodgeable properties. So Berserker is great in mid lane, in team fights. His ganks are okay. They can do a guard break and you can go into your zone mix up, and that enables them to get a free heavy, but you know, it does feed quite a bit of revenge, so you have to be careful about that. But overall, with the 4 MS chain lights, really good for stomping on casuals, people who aren't paying attention. The unblockables with all hyper armor, mind you, everything has hyper armor, so he's good in team fights with hyper armor, good in team fights with the dodge cancel recoveries and undodgeable dodge attacks. So if you miss the parry, or if he positions himself behind you and you don't know where to block, that dodge attack will hit you, so be careful about that. The zone itself, it is a pretty good ganking tool because you can keep someone stalled for days there, and there is a lot of pseudo mix-ups within that because there's a 400 MS follow-up. So I like to mess around and do another zone afterwards because a lot of people try to prediction parry a light attack, and so that means I get 16 damage with another 16 damage equaling 32 damage, and that's a pretty good number just by using 2 zones, okay? Pretty cool. A lot of people go for the empty guard break afterwards to catch people who throw heavies, but people who throw raw heavies and they don't feign it, you're gonna eat that, so it's not that fun. I personally don't like it. I've seen a lot of players use it before and they get punished severely for it. Overall though, Berserker is a character that, you know, kind of essentially uses his 4 MS light attacks a lot and mixes you up with the heavy attack that has hyper armor, the unblockables, and a solid pick overall. I would probably rate him an A+ tier character, but I think you have to kind of learn how to play him a little bit more methodically and defensively. A lot of Berserkers tend to just throw out attacks willy-nilly and take bad trades, and I'm the trade master, so the mid clear is not too bad either with his zoning. The forward heavy is an amazing chaser. Honestly, I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think it might be the best roll catcher in the entire game because this one, he runs towards you. It might even be better than Afeera's Bash Chaser, her fleeting foot. I don't know, Berserker just travels for days, and there's a bunch of phantom range within it, so you have to be careful when you run away from Berserker. The feats to be running is probably Doom Banner, Bounty Hunter. I like to run the Axe, of course. You can run Fury Flask, which is pretty powerful, but I like finishing off opponents, more of a solo queue type of play, whereas the other one with Fury Flask is more of a team play. The stalling is fantastic, one of the best stallers in the game right now. Anti-ganking is pretty darn good too with tons of unblockables, and the ganking I'd say is pretty mid-tier. Aramusha is the next character that we're going to talk about now. As for the mid-clear, pretty darn easy. He has the infinite combos, so you might as well use the same chain side heavies on left and the right, or just go for your light attack, depends on how you feel for the day. But overall, you know, I feel like his damage is pretty darn high for his chain heavies. They deal a lot of damage, more than average actually. It's basically finisher damage heavies. He has the Ring the Bell, unreactable offense. It is a slow killer, but the great thing about it is that you can cancel with the recoveries with your blockade, whether you want to do a light attack for 20 or a heavy attack for 16. That does an AoE attack, really safe, really good move overall. Or you can do a kick if they're near a wall and get a wall splat for a 27 damage side heavy. Pretty good. He does have access to deadly feints when you are in your heavy finisher mix-up, and they are basically unreactable. He can chip you down, and if you're not paying attention, you will eat those lights. And then of course we do have a dodge attack. Now this dodge attack is one of the best dodge attacks. The animation for it, especially when you target swap, it can be hard to tell, so target swapping this dodge attack will be your best friend. The best thing about Aramusha is that you can kind of let your heavies fly in team fights. The side heavies have really good horizontal cleave, so it's best to utilize that as much as you can. Just be careful if someone is going to be throwing unblockable. Your blockade can't save you, but if it's like a Zhanhu zone attack, things like that, you can easily punish that. The zone attack is not too shabby too, because that's where his unblockable comes from. The AoE for the hitboxes of the unblockable is surprisingly pretty big. He does have a solid roll catcher with hyper armor that can soft feint into Ring the Bell, so you can't underestimate him. He does a lot of damage if you let him, but overall, try not to do your best on hitting him during his recoveries, because he will try to blockade it. And then feats to use are probably deadly, so you can do more damage on those finisher heavies or even those light attacks. Try not to stall even longer. The anti-ganking is not too shabby either. You can deal a lot of damage pretty quickly with those deadly feints, and it does add up with all those chain heavies, dealing a ton of chip damage. And the ganking, I'd say, is pretty darn good too. Almost top tier, but it's a little bit slower, depends on the character that you're using. But Ring the Bell does do direct damage, and that is a nasty business. And for the rest of the feed, Second Wind or the Fire Bow is probably your best bet. And then Stalwart Banner or Fear itself doesn't really matter because they're all pretty solid feats and can be used to counter Fire Flask. And now we have Jormungandr. Now Jormungandr, he did get a big nerf recently where you're not able to chain on your pin anymore. So his chain bash, once you let it fly, you used to be able to do a light attack, a zone attack, an unblockable heavy finisher, and that was pretty decent for team fights. However, it wasn't that powerful in duels because most characters, practically every single character, already has a dodge attack or dodge bash, and it would interrupt him if he decided to go for a chain attack anyways. However, this makes it a little bit less frustrating to fight against him, so he will be guard broken if you decide to let it fly. However, this makes him have a little bit less chain pressure. He's still a strong pick with those enhanced light attacks, chain zone that has amazing hitboxes and hyper armor, unblockable heavy finishers that can wall splat. His guard break damage is pretty solid too, and if you do land the heavy, it will displace your opponent for wall splat. A lot of clutch potential there. Lots of high damage values. However, what did get nerfed was his pin damage. It only deals 26 now, still a pretty decent number that allows your teammates to land heavies, and with comparison to his tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4, it does have pretty decent synergy still. They still kept the damage above average, so that's good. So I don't think Yorm players should be too upset about that, since he still has tons of other utility. The forward heavy is a solid roll catcher with hyper armor, and you can soften it into a GB. Mid clearing this guy is a breeze. All you do is zone into light, into another zone, into light, rinse and repeat. Really, there's nothing wrong with Jormungandr. He's a really strong character, and I'd say he's a pretty easy character to pick up too for new players. The dodge attack is also pretty solid too, that can go into your mix-ups, and the feats I would probably be running are mostly the default feats. Jormungandr Salve gets your HP back. You can also use the tier 3 that slams your hammer, and that's probably the best feat for him. And then of course the tier 4 where you slam everybody and they all fall down. Twilight of the Gods is a game changer, so always having that equipped will be your best friend. The tier 2 will synergize with your pin, and you should always be running this anyways. A lot of people have said to utilize the zone instead of the pin attack, but if you do have the tier 2, I feel like it's a little bit more helpful since you're gonna be using your stamina a lot, and just refreshing the stamina between both parties is probably the best bet. But other than that, I don't think Jormungandr has changed too much when it comes to power level. Honestly, a powerful character to stall with. You can get your HP back, you can get your tier 2 that gives you shields. The stalling is fantastic, and you can also anti-gank with this character pretty well. Hitokiri will be one of your best no-brain characters and can pub stomp pretty well. All you have to do is charge your heavies. Not a lot of players will be able to parry your variable timed heavies consistently. I can parry these pretty decently if I'm focused, but if I'm chilling and just being chilling, not really paying attention, then I'm probably gonna have a tough time against Hitokiri and make some decent reads. Her mid clear is not too shabby either. They have a lot of cleave. All you do is just spam heavies. These heavies can also trap people who dodge, so it kind of has a little bit of undodgeable properties to it, but it's mostly due to the startup of the next heavy attack coming into play. So I would recommend you guys to not dodge and just go for the block and take the chip damage and attempt for the parries, because if you don't ever parry the heavy or try to, she'll just keep throwing the attack. The kick mix-up will only be reactable if you are paying attention and you have really fast reaction timings. If not, you will have to make a read. She can flicker her kick at the end, but that's only if you decide not to interrupt her, so there's a read in itself and you have to be careful with that. Other than that, the hyper armor on her neutral heavies has helped her quite a bit. The feats you should probably run are probably the default ones. You want to be able to execute someone with their tier 1 without getting interrupted, because that stops them from attacking you normally and they have to go for a bash or a guard break. Now I do like to run righteous deflection with the character because I do like to parry, and I feel it helps me a lot. It's kind of like a miniature juggernaut that I can get for about 5 seconds. Really helpful. It's about 50% damage reduction if you decide to parry in a 1v1 situation, or even better, a 1v2 situation. I also like to run Spirit Shroud, and this is kind of nice because it acts as a bastion when you're not off point. You know, you're not going to stay on point every time. You're going to rotate, help your teammates on mid, and I feel like this is pretty helpful. Heal on block used to be my go-to, but I feel like I don't get enough health afterwards in a lot of fights. Nuki could be helpful too, but I really don't run that, as I feel like I don't run out of stamina that much. And for tier 3, I prefer damage reduction. For the tier 4, you should probably run Fear itself or Zenban Zakura, and that's the one shot. You can easily have your teammate just go for a guard break when you start up your finisher. So with Hitokiri, I'd say she's a solid pick for new players. Really easy to play. Just throw heavies. You can clear mid, you have really good feats, and the heavies, most players won't be able to parry that, and you do have your kick mix-up and the charge heavy attack that you can just spam externals, because nobody wants to take a 34 damage heavy, I'll tell you that much. The stalling is not too shabby. The anti-ganking is not that great in my opinion. It kind of has like the same issues as Warden and Warmonger, where they're stuck with, it's like a read-based gameplay where you have to essentially make a read yourself on offense. The ganking is top tier though, in my opinion, because nobody wants to fight 34 damage heavy unblockables. Hitokiri is one of my favorite ASMR characters in this game that I like to play when it's about 3 AM and I'm just no-braining. Conqueror is a shell of himself, but he's still a pretty decent character if I do say so myself. The mid clear is not that bad, you just do light attacks or heavy attacks and has some decent cleave. Not the best, but of course, it does the job. We all know that he has unblockables for days. All of his heavies are unblockables. They're 22 damage, and even though they're 22, I feel like it doesn't matter too much because at the end of the day, most players aren't going to be reacting to that parry flash or the animation consistently. So when you're fighting in team fights or duels, I think it has decent cleave, decent hitboxes, and even if you whiff, you will be able to full block recovery because the full block recovery happens every single move that you can do. So that's really helpful for team fights, especially with characters that don't have that unblockable neutral pressure. Raider is probably an enemy that you have to watch out for, but I feel like he's fairly easy to deal with if you're playing safe. He still has the superior block deflex that you can go into and land a free bash, and of course with the tier 2 shield basher, you land a whopping 18 damage for every heavy parry. I cannot stress how powerful this is, and it'll swing health pools significantly. Conqueror also has a chain bash that is feightable, and if you do land it, you do get a light attack. However, with the shield basher feat, you do of course get 18 damage total because the shield basher feat does 6 damage. Overall, a character that doesn't have a roll catcher, he's more of an anchor on the point. Obviously, since the guard changes have affected him significantly, he's still not the best staller anymore, but he still does the job at a decent rate. I personally still think Conqueror is a strong hero, it's just that he could have been so much more. Unfortunately, he still has those same chain side lights that are about, I think, 1000 MS, so you ever see that weird animation where you kind of like that with his flail? I do get hit by it once in a blue moon, but that should just never be there in the first place. The running attack for this character is a bash, so if you do have the tier 2 shield basher, you can deal 6 damage, but other than that, it doesn't really have that much use to it. It can be a ganking tool of sorts, but it's fairly slow. I usually run speedy revive or body count, and then punch through is useless because your attacks are unblockable, but heal on block is probably your best friend. And then I've been messing around with uninterruptible, and it's basically passive hyper armor for about 30 seconds. It's not too shabby, but honestly, it seems like Catapult is still really useful, especially if you have teammates that can guard break confirm for it. Still, you don't want to underestimate Conqueror. He still has those finisher unblockables that he can use at range, and just kind of spam that. I've seen a lot of Conquerors just spam that in team fights, and it is profit because a lot of people don't know that they're being target swapped or externaled, and it's dangerous. It's honestly dangerous. Stalling is okay, the anti-ganking is pretty meh. Once they roll away, it's basically Joe over, and the ganking is also kind of meh as well. It's not that powerful, he doesn't really have anything crazy. Okay, so up next we have Pirate, and I have a lot to say about her. I think she still remains an A tier character. She still has plenty of tools to utilize against the matchmaking lobbies. I've said time and time again, if you're not fighting literally the 1% every single game or the 0.01% and the comp players in Scrim every single day, then Pirate is still a good character. Just because the 1% can parry her unblockables with the animations 100% of the time doesn't mean she's a bad character overall. She still has lots of good dueling potential if you're good enough, have good enough reads, and you can also just fly around for days in the team fight with her because her dodge attack, dodge cancel recoveries, baby. Dodge cancel recoveries after every single move. This helps her out tremendously, and you can weave through battle doing whatever the heck you want because her hitboxes on her dodge attack are pretty large as well. The chain bash does direct damage, and with that you can also do an undodgeable light if you want to dodge that. Her chain hyper armor with their heavies is really good, has a lot of distance you can travel, and of course the pistol blast, yes, it feeds a lot of revenge, but it should feed a lot of revenge. You wanna know why? Because it gives your teammate plenty of time to land free heavies on the opponent. Not everyone is going to be full HP, and so they probably won't even get revenge most of the time. If you're careful and you play smart with her, then you'll do well. She's not the character she was at launch, where she could literally just shred every single person in existence. With the forward dodge heavy being an unblockable and hyper armor, you can use it for decent trades, and go ahead and utilize it for ganks if you know it. The unblockable heavy finisher has a soft vein, and like I said, it is pretty good. Most people won't be able to react to it, so you still have plenty of tools to dish out damage. And if you're near a wall, you can let it it fly without the pistol blast, and you will get another 20 damage. I think the main issue about this character is specifically the neutral damage. I don't know why Ubisoft keeps trying to do this, but they need to make the neutral damage at least 23, and if a character has a follow-up like a pistol blast or like a follow-up light attack, make that 1 damage and allow it to be used as a ganking tool, because it seems like they love making characters with more ganks. So the best way to fix her is make her heavy, do 23 damage, and if you want to use the follow-up pistol blast, it's 1 damage. After that, she would be perfect and you wouldn't need to change anything about the character. All in all, Pirate is still a very strong character. I still see her do very well in my lobbies, and I'm sure the 99% of you who actually play the game don't think she's a dog shit hero. Feats to be running should probably be the Armor Piercing Slug, Bloodlust if you want to get some more damage in, Thrilling Comeback is good, you get a little bit of revenge back, Trick Shot should always be running that, does a lot of bleed damage and ricochets. Gunpowder Surprise is a team winning feat, but if you want to be indomitable and get a little bit of shield for anti-ganking, go ahead and be my guest. Overall, I still think this character is still strong. She needs a few tweaks to her kit, nothing too major because she still has a place in the meta. I don't want her to be a character that does literally everything like she used to, so let's just keep it simple. Lawbringer, my boy, he is getting a rework eventually, and it seems like they're gonna take their sweet time on trying to get the 3rd iteration of Testing Grounds for Lawbringer. But right now, currently where he stands, you know, he's an okay character. I don't think he's the strongest, especially if you don't have the reactions or the reads, so if you just start picking them up, you might suffer, but once you get, you know, the fundamentals down, understand certain character mix-ups, I think he starts to really excel once you start getting little parries and start to realize what externals are. The mid-clear is pretty good, the heavies now have more hitboxes in general, so that's really helpful for team fights, and I would recommend you to not be too offensive with this character. He's mainly a defensive playstyle, you gotta play methodically. It's nice that his lights are enhanced, however, he has to throw that raw heavy, and if people parry that, well, your turn is over. With the forward and side dodge bashes, he has some okay offense. It's not like everyone is gonna be dodging this, but I feel like more people dodge this bash more often than not. It is just the 300 to 500 MS bash, but what's nice is that his forward dodge actually has really good recoveries compared to most of the cast, so you can utilize this to your advantage, whether you want to do a forward dodge, use a light attack to catch people's dodges, their empty dodges, or go for a heavy to mix them up. I think there's a lot of small tips and tricks for Lawbringer that you need to keep playing him to understand your matchups against every single character. And what makes him really strong, and I believe that's why I put him up in the A tiers, is because his Impale and tons of his ganking utilities and stalling capabilities. With the Impale, you basically do more than heavy damages with the stun, reducing stamina on your opponent, and it basically becomes hell for them, and they have to make a read on the next incoming attack. That's what makes him so strong. Being a B+ tier character is, I think, a good choice for him. New players won't excel with him, but people who are actually good at the game and have learned to utilize reads and reactions with the animations of the characters, then he starts to skyrocket up a little bit higher. However, he doesn't have any roll catchers. The stalling is pretty good with Lawbringer, lots of health pool, and the feats he uses are great, but I would say the anti-ganking is just not really there. He doesn't have that roll catcher, so you can't do much when people roll away from him, and he doesn't really have a good opener. The only way you can open people up is with the forward bash, then you can get to your unblockable mix-up, which has an amazing cleave. The top one is incredibly slow, but there's not that much use for it. You can be a little bit nifty and sneaky with it because a lot of people don't see it at all. It might get surprised by the animation, but if you know anything about Lawbringer, if he does use that top heavy unblockable, you can light him on reaction and he'll get interrupted by it, so it's pretty funny. Long armor, of course, is really good as a gank tool. I would not use this from neutral unless you were just dicking around. If you do get an impale, the best optimal punish is to utilize that long arm so that it counts as a pin and your teammates' heavies will be full damage. The zone has pretty good recoveries, but it seems like with the new rework, I don't want to get too far into it, but he's become an offensive machine. Right now he's a defensive machine, and the new one he's just going to keep attacking. The feats that I would probably run is going to be Harsh Judgment. If you guys didn't know, this for 30 seconds, it will cost 25% more stamina for all your opponent's attacks. The stamina regen is slowed, and the OS recovery is slowed. So this is a very powerful tier 1. It's not like game changing, but it is really helpful. Tier 2, I always run Righteous Deflection. I think this is much more helpful than Juggernaut. Juggernaut, as great as it is, I love to go in for parries, and I feel my parry game is pretty shagadelic, so getting 50% damage reduction after, 5 seconds every single time is worth it in my opinion. You survive for long periods of time. Juggernaut is great if you don't want to go for parries, but most people just tend to just walk away or run away. Tier 3, you can either go for second wind or you can go for more bong. The Bugness Mortis, I think that's probably better. It's very slow, but it deals a lot of damage if you need to clear mid lane really quickly or just try to get a really sneaky kill. And of course the tier 4, go with the Igneous Ember, that's your other bomb, and you essentially just delete people with 4 bombs, you do a ton of damage, and there's just no way that you can be stopped, honestly. Like, I kid you not, Lawbringer is the king, once you get good at the game, unfortunately. But, overall, Lawbringer is just a character that is parry this, and you will win most of the time. Gladiator is the next B+ tier character, and sad to say, if you suck at Reflex Guard, I would not recommend playing this character. That goes for all Reflex Guard characters in general. His mid clear is asinine, it is painful. You can do the 4 or 5 chain light attacks, you can do the zone. Doesn't matter because he needs a lot of stamina doing it, so I would avoid fighting in mid lane as much as you can. This character is a ganking hero, and you need to do your best to toe step and guarantee those skewers that will land 37 damage, I believe, and it's one of the strongest deflects in the entire game if you're able to land it and don't use it against a character with hyper armor, which can be a little bit tricky because a lot of characters do have hyper armor, but the toe stab being 600 ms, most people won't be able to dodge this consistently. It's still pretty good. I would say it might be 50-50 depending on who you're fighting, but the toe stab itself is very powerful. It pins them and for a very long animation, and Gladiator can essentially just use skewer after every single mix-up while having frame advantage. Toe stab gives you frame advantage, and landing heavy gives you frame advantage, and the sucker punch as well. So try to utilize that as best as you can. Although with the sucker punch getting nerfed when you dodge to the side, it does make him more vulnerable, but overall, like I said, he is a ganker. I don't think he has any anti-gank capabilities at all. The stalling is not really that great either. With Reflex Guard and having no dodge cancel recoveries, it makes him very weak. The ganking, however, is much better. Once you learn a few skewer ganks, you'll realize how powerful he is when it comes to ganking. Okay, the top light is 433 ms, so that's fairly fast for one of the top lights, but the side ones will be 500, so I would recommend keeping your guard on top if you are fighting a Gladiator. The zone attack is 600 ms, and that's still a solid opener and goes into your basically unpunishable heavy attack, which you can feint. Most characters can't punish this consistently, so you have to dodge pretty darn early. Okay, feats that I would be running for him is obviously Bounty Hunter. You could run Deadly and get more attack, but Bounty Hunter is probably the best bet. Righteous Deflection is a maybe, but I would prefer using Haymaker every single time. Your max punish for throws or guard breaks would be a throw onto a wall and dealing a heavy attack, dealing a ton of damage. For some reason, Gladiator's heavies do 23 damage, and I think that was only due to him having really low guard break vulnerabilities before, and that was a really long time ago, but now that he has normal guard break vulnerabilities, it should be 24. Always run Neptune's Wrath, does 50 damage, and Fear itself or Catapult. Really depends on your playstyle. Gryphon is next up, and I've seen way more Gryffindors lately due to his recent buff a couple patches ago. With the forward light being enhanced, this really helps him out, open people up. It can be hard to differentiate between the forward light and the Ninja Show, his forward heavy, which is an amazing roll catcher, so you have to kind of respect that fact. Once you get into his mix-up, you gotta understand that if you don't react to the kick, you will be getting hit by the undodgeable light attacks or the finisher heavies. These ones have hyper armor and have a lot of cleave, great in team fights now. Gryphon, after a parry, he does get hyper armor afterwards on all of his attacks, so it's pretty cool. You can do a zone attack or the double light. Now the double light is cool because it can stall and set people up to land free heavies that give them enough time. I always try to delay these because it really messes up with people's timing, and it's a fun BM in my opinion. The kick itself is guard breakable, so you gotta be careful on using this consistently, so try to utilize them with the forward dodge heavy, so you gotta be careful on using this move. However, he still has plenty of tools in his kit when it comes to dealing offense. He's not a character that has chain pressure like the rest of the characters, but I think what he does well enough. His forward dodge bash is 300 to 5 RMS, so it is fairly slow. However, most people won't be able to dodge this consistently, so I'd say it's a decent opener. With his forward running attack being a pin and it flips you over, I don't think it's that helpful. I wish it would give me a little bit more frame advantage in my opinion. Maybe Gryphon could start off with a light attack or something like that. I think that'd be much more powerful instead of just setting everyone back to neutral. It's not really neutral. He does get frame advantage with the forward bash, but you know, that move is already pretty slow enough. The mid clear is pretty good for Gryphon. The heavies have tons of hitboxes, and I'd say overall this character has gotten a lot better. The stalling capabilities are not too bad either because the dodge attack is pretty good, has a lot of cleave, but however, I will say the anti-ganking is kind of lackluster, doesn't have chain pressure like I said, and once you use that kick, it's basically Joe over. The ganking is not that powerful either. I'd say he's pretty mediocre. The only great thing about this character, I'd say his clutch potential, is his wall splat damage. His wall splat damage allows him to get 32 damage, and his throw punishes are pretty darn far. For his feats, I would definitely be running Stern Stare or Fast Recovery. It really helps you out in attacking more or just trying to help be a teammate and lower people's attacks. Dragon Knight Miss is probably your best bet, heals your teammates, really good against people who use bleed or fire. Dragon Knight Bolt, as I said, he's basically a paladin, and that's the favorite thing about this character. I think a lot of people enjoy this aspect. Dragon Knight Cleanser or Champion's Aura. Now, Dragon Knight Cleanser is good, does a lot of bomb damage, and it also does a small pool of healing, while Champion's Aura is pretty shagadelic. You're basically a walking stalwart banner. I like Gryphon. I think he's okay where he's at currently, but a little bit of quality life changes would probably help him. And here we have my good man Warden. Now Warden, he did get a few buffs a couple patches ago, and I'd say they were pretty darn significant. Now this made it so that his finisher heavies much bigger hitboxes. They're much faster too. They're 100 ms faster, and by gum, does this do a lot for this character. I would say it makes him much stronger, but it doesn't put him up in the high tiers. And you want to know why? Of course, dodge cancel recoveries. No dodge cancel recoveries, no full blocks, and no hyper armor on anything. I will say his zone is pretty helpful for peeling and has pretty decent hitboxes. His light attacks, nothing special. He does have crushing counter on his top one, but that is easily baited. I think it's the oldest trick in the book where you do a top heavy feint and the Warden always goes for it. And I think it's because his animation is just so telling. Other than that, of course, he still has that chained bash where you can charge it with hyper armor, one of the best moves in the game. However, it is fairly slow to utilize in Dominion, so if you want to kill someone fast, you're gonna have to charge it. And the best thing about this move is that you will be able to edge the bash in a 1v or 2v1 situation. It's not like the best thing to do, but you can force a reaction out of opponents. Otherwise, just do a light whiff into unblockable heavy mix-up. Another neat thing about Warden is that if you are able to get into a 1v2 situation, basically you're dead. So GG's and good luck with that. Now it's great that he's able to get into a shoulder bash after a heavy attack and a finisher heavy, but come on, who are we kidding here? Everyone has dodge cancel recoveries, and you're gonna get smacked out of everything. To play this character well, you have to have good reactions, good reads, and be able to play with your team well. If you're just going on to a point trying to stall for days, it's not gonna end well for you 9 times out of 10. Warden will be needing some sort of buff or rework in the near future that doesn't focus entirely on a shoulder bash, giving a parry counter of some sorts. Anything like that would make him more unique. The feats that I would personally run would just be body count. Being the mid lane is pretty important. Your clear is pretty insane. Inspire is your best bet. Don't run Fiat Lux, it's not that great. Want to be running Pugnus Mortis. I feel like Pugnus Mortis is pretty darn helpful. Does a lot more damage than you need to because one, Warden has terrible feats. It's really meh feats. Second wind is okay, but I feel like dealing more damage as Warden because you're not really that good in team fights is just more helpful and beneficial to your team. I would run Catapult over Stalwart Banner or Morale Booster. Catapult is the way. Old reliable Kensei. Kensei is the GOAT. You know, he's one of the characters that still have that cool heavy soft feint into light, just like Shama Mama, or you can soft feint into heavy. Why don't more characters have that? I wish we would get a new character that does that, but I digress. Kensei is, I would call him pretty close to balance. You know, I think he's a little bit weaker compared to the rest of the characters, but there's such a thing as power creep. Now Kensei, he does have 3 chain lights, pretty easy to get into for a new character and a new hero. 3 chain heavies. The finisher does have hyper armor, which makes him pretty decent for team fighting. Just gotta be careful because a lot of characters do have dodge cancel recoveries. The pommel strike is 400 ms, but it takes a while for you to get into your heavy attack, which is a soft feintable into the pommel strike. So be careful on getting interrupted. It is faster and you do get frame advantage, so it's much better when it comes to the unblockable mix-up because it does 34 damage. His wall splats also do 34 damage with the unblockable being guaranteed, and this makes it so that his clutch potential can be pretty helpful if you're not getting attacked, because you need to be able to defend yourself since the dodge attack is a light parry now, but it's good because it's solid in team fights because you can target swap that and the animation is fairly hard to tell. The mid-clear, of course, is amazing. He's always been known to mid-clear very quickly, with the zone attack being a huge hitbox. One of the best zone attacks in the game, in my opinion. The peeling for this character is great too, because he has a lot of good range. But I will say that he is a character that can be easily defeated, because a lot of new players don't know how to use him that well. You gotta play him a little bit more methodically, otherwise you will get stomped. What's nice about Kensei's unblockable is that you can softband it into a light attack or a heavy attack and get some nasty trades against people who try to interrupt you or go for dodge attacks, especially the external dodge attacks. It has a really good range. Other than that, Kensei is just a solid character overall. I would definitely be running Tierlist as one of his feats. You could run body count if you want. I would definitely be running fast recovery or body count, depends on what you like to play in the mid lane, which gives you a little bit of HP back, but I don't think it's worth it. I'd rather have more stamina when you're OS and just attacking in general. Chilling Stare is probably going to be your best bet. You could run Inspire, depends on how your playstyle, but I would always run Longbow for 50 damage, really powerful. And then afterwards you could run Stalwart Banner or the Unblockable. Both are good, and it doesn't matter. You could use Aerostorm too, but I prefer running Unblockable because it's pretty cool to have all your attacks be unblockable. Shugoki is the next B+ character in line here, and he has a lot of strengths, but he also has quite a few weaknesses as well. Let's just go over it. The mid clear is pretty solid, you just zone, good stuff, and his bash, which is his forward and his dodge, does do direct damage, 10 damage, not too shabby, kills people without them feeding too much revenge and getting revenge either. His heavies are variable timed, and if you aren't the 1% or person who can consistently parry his heavy attacks, which are variable timed, then you're not going to have the best of time with Shugoki. Shugoki will reign supreme because he can let those heavies fly that have hyper armor on all of them, so that's pretty shagadelic. He also has the finisher heavy, which takes a little bit long to load up, but it will deal quite a bit of damage with pretty decent hitboxes as well. Shugoki does have that forward heavy, and it's an okay roll catcher. It does have some pretty good range to it, but I think you kind of have to make a read if you see someone dodging away from your unblockable mix-up. He is able to utilize his headbutt within his chain bash, so if you get a light attack or a heavy, pretty good teamfight initiator or option selector if you want to take a bit of trades here and there and get to your mix-up, go into your headbutt and utilize the unblockable heavy mix-up. If you do get a guard break, you do get the demon ball, and if they're near a wall, you can get a light attack, a zone attack, and all that good stuff. The clutch potential of this character is that his hug is devastating, does 20 damage, and gives you some health back, which is really helpful. Wall splats are really powerful with this character, and with the demon ball, a lot of characters can just confirm heavies or a forward heavy as well, with your teammates being nearby. This character overall has definitely gotten power crept. He used to be a very strong pick, but now he's a little bit more in the balanced category. He doesn't have amazing chain pressure anymore, but he will chip you down if you don't parry those very well timed heavies. Hard to interrupt him as well because he does have hyper armor, but what I will say about Shugoki is that, man, my guy, he is a big boy. For stalling, I'd say he's pretty decent. I wouldn't say he's the worst, but if you do manage to make a read on his side dodge bashes, you can guard break him, which is his weakness. However, I think he has pretty decent perks that let him survive on points for a very long time. With Speedy Revive or Iron Lungs, which is unironically the best feat to use for him because you're able to sprint while out of stamina, I would probably be running Juggernaut so you can take more damage and stay on point longer. Punch Through is pretty decent too, but most people will be running Longbow. This does 50 damage, and then of course Staggering Blow is the best feat for him. Pretty strong, and I think you can kind of win a lot of team fights just by using that feat. However, it is pretty fun to use the hug. Even if you're ganking someone that's revenge, you can kind of just spam it, and a lot of times you'll catch someone within the recoveries, and that is a pretty good stall for someone in revenge. So fun character, but not the best. I'd say you definitely should pick him up just so you can enjoy the hugs. Shaman is in a tricky situation. Now, Shaman is a really good duelist, probably one of the best characters due to her having soft faintable 4MS light attacks from her heavy startup, but in team fights this is pretty useless. This is really only useful if you catch someone off in a 1v1 situation, and it's very powerful in that regard because it is unreactable and you can get tons of your health back by attacking them when they are bleeding, so that's a really cool clutch potential. She doesn't have any dodge cancel recoveries really that are helpful. She does have that dodge cancel recoveries within her chain heavy that she can go into, or a finisher heavy that she can dodge into and go for a bite, but I digress. That's not really helpful for team fights. You need to be able to have good neutral game, and Shaman doesn't have any of that. She does have that forward bash mix up, but it's fairly slow and uses a lot of stamina. You only get a zone or a light attack that goes into your unblockable mix up. Shaman, however, does have pretty nice clutch potential on getting that bite, and that pounce is 35 damage. I'll tell you what, it's important to know that if you do get a bite, all the bleed goes away. So if you do get interrupted by an attack, it's basically all for naught. Sometimes it's best just to do raw damage, especially when you know there's a team fight coming soon. A lot of us can't resist just going for the bite, so be careful out there. If you see a Shaman on your team, most of the time she's gonna go for a bite, so help her out by doing a light hit stun, and don't go for guard breaks or bashes because it will mess them up, because this counts as a pin and the bash hit stun is not going to work. What's nice about Shaman though is that she is a really good chaser. The forward lunging heavy attacks are fantastic. Always use the right one. The right one is the fastest. The left one is much slower, and I believe it's about 700, it might be 800 ms, but it's funny because that one actually has pretty good hitboxes, but the right one is the fastest, so you should try to utilize that as much as you can. I think Shaman is a really hard character to play in Dominion because there's so many attacks coming your way with reflex guard, having lower health pools, and having really no strong teamfight capabilities. She kind of suffers in that regard. Hyper Armor just kind of excels. Even with her deflex, she can deflect to incoming heavies that have Hyper Armor, but that doesn't really happen too often, especially in team fights. Like I said, 1v1 is very strong, S tier for sure, but in Dominion, it just doesn't count. I see a lot of bad Shaman players out there. When you do find a good one, your jaw kind of drops, but most of the time this character is very hard to use. You need to have good reactions, good reads, and a good team to set her up. Without that, she's screwed. The stalling capabilities are pretty much non-existent. They're negligible. Anti-ganking is also negligible. The ganking is much more powerful if you have a good teammate that knows how to gank and use the Shaman bite. The feats that I would be running for her is stealth for sure. You could run rush to get to the point faster. She is one of the fastest characters in the game. Bear trap is also really helpful to set up very powerful running heavies into a heavy, into a bleed, because that is guaranteed. That's one of her best tools, to stay on a point and just wait for an enemy to come and try to take it. It's basically Joe over at that point. You should run Fury and Fire Flask, probably going to be your best bet, but I personally enjoy the hand axe because I like to utilize more duels in this game. Fire Flask is still going to do tons of damage overall, so it's not that big of a deal. You could also run Nail Bomb as well, but like I said, both are team-changing fights. Nuxia, with the recent buffs that she did get with the improved heavies, and the traps being 100 ms later, making them more unreactable, she still kinda revolves in the same place. This character is a high skill curve character, and you'll need to have amazing reactions and reads and a good team to set you up. The mid clear is okay with her zone attack, and the zone itself is also, kind of situational as well. It does kind of force a reaction out of opponents, but like I said, hyper armor exists, unblockables with huge hitbox exist, so Nuxia can't really ever be meta. And they also nerfed her call traps so that they stay up for less and they have a bigger cooldown, which makes more sense. She does have a deflect which helps in 1v1s, and her heavies do have pretty big hitboxes. And let's not forget that her finisher heavies can wall splat, so that is her clutch potential. I'd say in 1v1s, Nuxia is a very powerful character. If you do find her in Dominion, you gotta be careful, don't underestimate her, because her heavies will deal a lot of damage, especially with her tier 1 deadly duet. I cannot stress to you how powerful this is. This brings all of her damage values pre-CCU. She'll do 26 damages, neutral heavy. Her chains will be even more, all the way up to freaking 29 and 30 and all that good stuff. It is insane, and you will melt. You will get melted, alright? You will melt in her mouth. It's crazy stuff, guys. It's happened to me before all the time. I always go back to Nuxia. Always fall for traps. With the 400 ms chain lights pretty much being unreactable, you can eventually get worn down by her, okay? The stalling capabilities, non-existent. Anti-ganking, it's okay. She does have like that forward light to roll catch, but the range isn't the greatest, and the ganking is okay with the traps. They will feed quite a bit of revenge if you do miss, so do your best to not be in that situation in the first place. Nuxia, like I said, no dodge cancel recoveries, and overall a strong character in the right hands, but you'll always be taking a lot of raw heavies to the face, even with the trap being a little bit later. This character requires you to make reads upon reads and being a step ahead of your opponent. Highlander is the next character I'm gonna talk about. My goodness, guys, my goodness, where have we gone wrong? He's the C tier character, and I think he is a powerful character in the right hands, and you need a good team to set you up. But overall, a lot of the Highlanders that I do meet, and people that you're going to fight in a casual matchmaking, you know, he's not going to be the best character to fight against. If you guys didn't know, you can essentially just dodge roll his kick to caber. In 4v4, you should definitely be doing that, because what you do in 4v4, you do it for your team and you don't want to let them down. That's my personal philosophy. Do your best to win. Anyways, Highlander does have crushing counters on his light attacks, which can be very helpful. He also has hyper armor on his chain lights and goes into a hyper armor finisher heavy. Pretty powerful stuff, pretty good for team fighting, I'd say, if you want to go for nasty traits. However, I will say that his bread and butter will be his offensive stance. Offensive stance, you have to use kick or caber. I would not recommend using this in general unless they are out of stamina, because this can easily be dodge rolled, or characters that have any dodge attacks in general will just obliterate Highlander with that mix up. So it's best to never use that. Always go for heavy unblockable into kick, or heavy unblockable feint into, you know, defensive play on your dodge attack, which is, the dodge attack is pretty powerful. The animation for it looks amazing, but of course target swapping attacks will make the animation look a little bit funky. The mid clear is okay. I'd say it's a little bit more bearable than a character like Gladiator, because at least your zone has a pretty decent hitbox and it hits 3 times, but you want to be utilizing your Highlander offensive stance as much as possible, landing those unblockables from externals, wave dashing away from opponents, and utilizing that to your best of your abilities. The 400 MS light attacks will be unreactable to literally every single person, so try to use that as much as you can. Just be careful, because you have no guard in that stance. And since Highlander has no roll catcher, his anti-ganking is pretty lackluster. Stalling is okay. A lot of people try to use the heavy unblockable and a kick, myself included. Try not to use that when you're trying to anti-gank someone. It just really doesn't work, because a lot of people can just dodge and it won't even track them, which is really unlucky. The ganking, however, is where he excels. A lot of players have been getting hit by my heavy unblockables consistently because my teammate is using light attacks to confirm for it. So if you have a friend, just try to remember you can use a light attack to confirm the unblockable heavy attack, and this will finish off someone instantly, if they don't go for the parry, that is. The best thing to do for Highlander is to utilize your caber. If someone does make a move, the opponent, try to watch out what the heck he's gonna do, and if he does get block stun or hit stun, it's best to use caber there so you can land a pin for 30 damage whopping heavy. For his feats, I would definitely be running faster recovery so you can attack more and get your stamina back, because you will be using a lot of stamina for this character. Bear Trap is okay, but I would run Inspire or Winner's Advantage, because after a successful attack for Winner's Advantage, you deal 20% more damage for 1.5 seconds, which is really helpful. Longbow is probably your best bet. I don't really run Second Wind. I want to do as much damage as possible, and using Spear Storm or Fire Flask and Champion's Aura are not too bad choices either. And of course, we have the last hero, Peacekeeper, the worst character in Dominion for, I don't know, man. I think it's been the longest time. Maybe not 7 years, but like maybe 5, 6 years for the longest time. My god. I feel bad for people who play this character. She is very hard to use in a high level setting. I think in mid-tier levels she'll be a little bit better, but let's just quickly go over some of her strengths and weaknesses. Mid-clear is pretty good. Her zone does a lot of cleave, which is nice. Hitboxes are pretty good, and it can ledge people if you do get a heavy parry, so keep in mind that's pretty important, because you'll need that as Peacekeeper. Her lights are unreactable, with the 4MS chain light and the top one also being pretty unreactable for most players. Heavy soften into light is pretty powerful, does bleed, and that enables you to go into your enhanced lights to go into your unblockable heavy mix-up, which is pretty cool. And it's a little bit funny that she does need to get bleed off an opponent, which is cool, but that's what makes Peacekeeper Peacekeeper. She doesn't just get easy access to unblockables. But unfortunately, this is pretty much all useless, because once someone starts externaling you, you're basically screwed. She has no dodge cancel recoveries that are as amazing as Orochi's or Zhanhu's. She can reposition, and she has a lot of damage within her guard break bleed stabs. Of course, they're standard, but it's a lot of bleed and synergizes well with Warmongers, with Nobushi, and once she becomes a little bit stronger in the meta, I think those characters will rise as well. Overall, a lot of people aren't going to be utilizing that. What they're going to be doing is basically just trying to attack people from externals, and Peacekeeper just can't do that. She's a character that has to play methodically and incredibly safe in team fights, with hyper armor, unblockable heavies, getting hit stun and bash stun, pin resets, on all that crazy stuff. She doesn't really stand a chance. You have to have god tier reactions and god tier reads. I've had some amazing games with her, but there have also been a lot of games where I felt like I couldn't do much. The stalling capabilities are okay. I would not really try to stall with her Anti-ganking, non-existent. Ganking also, I mean, it's mediocre compared to the rest of the characters. You have to learn certain setups and things like that, and otherwise, I feel like a nuisance to my team or a hindrance, and it's best to just pick a character like Medjay. Okay, hopefully she gets some buffs in the future. One thing I'd like to do is that have her soft main line attack actually be enhanced and trickle and do like 4 or 3 bleed damage ticks so that she can get into her enhanced light and unblockable heavy attacks. It wouldn't make her overpowered, it would still keep that vibe of Peacekeeper, not having unblockable heavies, just like every other character. Makes her a little bit more of a skill curved character and a higher skill floor hero. Feats that you should be running is Bounty Hunter or Stealth. Stealth can be pretty helpful. You kind of run around and just grab people from behind. It's kind of cool, and I would not recommend to do that in public, but in this video game, I'd say it's totally okay. Don't run Fiat, guys. It's horrible. Just run Thick Skin. It does help you survive a little bit less because you get 25% less damage for 3 seconds, and that's pretty helpful. I'm not going to lie to you. It's pretty darn helpful, and it's not triggered by chip damage, which is cool. Crossbow is nice, but I would always kind of run Sharpen's Blade because in a 1v1 setting, that's where she does excel. So you're able to essentially just finish someone off as soon as you get a bleed off of on them or a guard break. Those 3 stabs are going to be killer. Alright, quickly, let's just go over the 1v1 to us because this video is like almost 2 hours long. It might be 2 hours, but I'll just showcase some of the different parts about each character on why they've switched in different places in 1v1s and Dominion. And the biggest offender right here, Medjay, he's moved all the way down to the B tiers. His 1v1 potential, his stat form is useless in 1v1. His axe form is okay, but basically Ocelotl is the reworked Medjay. So Medjay gets weakened significantly. And as you can see here, Shaman is S tier because 4RM has unreactable offense. You can't external that anymore, so it becomes a very hard thing to react to. And with the pounce giving you 35 damage plus, it's probably about 40 damage with the bleed stack, so that is very powerful, and you are not going to be able to get the hell out of that. Centurion and Warlord will go up to the S tiers because these guys can be very hard to react to in 1v1s. Warlord with his fast headbutts, frame advantage on everything, hyper armor, and wall splats are crazy good with this character. Centurion, however, with the variable timed heavies, you're not going to be able to parry that consistently. You'll take chip damage, and with the punch reducing your stamina all the time, it's still a really powerful 50-50 bash. The wall splats will make and break this character, and there will be walls everywhere, I can promise you that much. Lawbringer is going to be way up in the A tiers because wall punishes are incredibly powerful. Impale will make and break this character. Once you get a parry, you just absolutely demolish their HP and their stamina pool. As you can see here, a lot of the characters from the S tiers drop down to the A tiers just because they're decent in 1v1s, but where they shine the most and excel is going to be in 4v4. So their 1v1 potential is still good, but they're not the best out there. As you can see here, Peacekeeper rises up to the B+ tiers. I would rate her up a little bit higher, maybe in the A tiers, but you really have to be focusing against these characters here to do especially well. So if you're not focused, those 4MS chain light attacks and the 4MS soft vein top light attack is going to be devastating. But if you're fairly focused and you're fighting against really good players, then she might be a little bit hard to use, and you have to essentially specialize in her kit. So still strong, but overall kind of depending on how good your reaction timing and your reads are. Okay, who else got freaking changed? Part is a little bit lower now compared to being in the A tier category, but in 1v1s, a lot of people can find ways to option select her more easily. If you don't know, you can do a light attack on her unblockable if she uses the pistol blast every single time, so that weakens her significantly. But overall, I think she's still an okay character, a little bit worse. But as you can see here, Orochi is also lower. His kick is more reactable, and his Storm Rush is reactable in 1v1s. The only time I get hit by this Storm Rush is if I go for a parry, but usually you will be able to block it. He's still an okay character in the right hands, but you know, he's not going to be amazing. Nobushi is D tier down here. She's S tier up here, or A+ tier, but right here she doesn't have any valid openers, at least on PC and New Gen, I believe. She is fairly reactable. Her kick's not that fast. It does have wall slap potential, but the bleed just doesn't help that much when I can just slowly back away and walk away from her mix-ups because she doesn't have a valid opener. So I rank her very low. You can get some clutch potential games with her where you just have amazing chain pressure, but that doesn't happen too often. You can underestimate her, but I think she's still a trash can in duels specifically. Ocelotl is still fairly the same character. I'd say his mix-ups are still really good. I tell you, the 4MS chain lights take you very far, and being unpunishable by dodge attacks, going to your chain, continue your oppressive mix-up is very powerful for players that aren't going to be used to his animations, because animations are hard to tell where he's going to attack. With the uninteractable chain bash mix-up, I still think he's a really strong character. So there you have it. That is going to be the end of the tier list. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did agree or disagree, please let me know, as your thoughts are greatly appreciated, and like to see what your opinions are on the meta in this season. It will change eventually because Ubisoft is going to be doing some serious bash changes. Lawbringer rework's going to come out, and I'm pretty sure they're going to buff Peacekeeper or Highlander eventually, and they're probably going to do a few buffs or nerfs to Ocelotl again, since I'm sure that the bash changes that they did right now aren't the best for the certain character, or they might just buff the 4 MS damage light attack. We'll see what happens, but overall I had a lot of fun making this, and hope you enjoyed the tier list. Always fun to make. Let me know how your For Honor games have been going, and if you guys have been picking the top tier characters and seeing if they have given you pretty good results. If not, let me know why, and let me know if the tier list is actually helping you guys. I love to talk about For Honor, and I love hearing myself talk about For Honor, so hope you guys have a great night, and thank you for watching. As always, you BEA beautiful souls. The box is done with this video. I'll be making a what to do in revenge video very soon, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you guys like the video, leave a comment and all that good stuff, and be sure to check out my streams, which I stream on Twitch. I'll stream mostly For Honor, but a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Take care. Bye bye. See you later.